Thank you for joining us today, Secretary King.
Excited to join you.
Yes, it's a great day here in Maryland, and so for the people who don't know about you, I want you to take this time to introduce yourself to the people. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me on. I got into the race for governor for the very same reasons I got into public service in the first place. Deep belief in the role that public institutions can play in people's lives. And that really is grounded in my experience as a kid. I grew up the son of two educators. My mom was a teacher and school counselor. My dad was a teacher and administrator. They both passed away, though, when I was a kid. My mom when I was 8 and my dad when I was 12. And in the period when it was just my dad and me, my dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. And home was incredibly difficult. I didn't know what my father would be like from one night to the next. Some nights he'd be sad, angry, even violent. The thing that saved me was school. School was the one place in my life that was safe and consistent, and public school teachers made school a place where I could be a kid when I couldn't be a kid at home. And so I became an educator, really to try to do for other kids what teachers had done for me. I was a high school social studies teacher. I was a middle school principal, led schools at the local level and state level before coming to work for President Obama, first as Deputy Secretary of Education and then as United States Secretary of Education. Huge responsibility, 50 million kids in our K-12 schools, 20 million plus students in our higher ed institutions, a budget $15 billion bigger than the budget of the state of Maryland. Love that work and wanted, after the administration ended, to continue to focus on education equity. And I've been leading an education civil rights organization called the Education Trust. So that's kind of my professional background. I live in Silver Spring. My wife is an educator as well, and we have 2 kids who've come through the Montgomery County Public Schools.
Well, awesome. You said a lot of great things in there that touch my heart. I'm, a product of public schools, Prince George's County Public Schools, and then, later on Bowie State. So promoting HBCUs as well.
Absolutely.
But of course, one of the things that you said was a social studies teacher. My favorite teacher in high school is Brian Wink. So he was my history and government teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And, I like to tell him that, he's the one that got me, engaged in civics and, really kind of questioning ethics of different elected officials and administration. So, he's the one that really got me involved. And, it's the teachers, that drive the passion, that get the students involved. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Absolutely. And look, the teaching of history is under attack. The teaching of social studies is under attack around the country and here in Maryland right now. So we really have to lift up our social studies and history teachers and make the case for why it's important to teach the truth of our history.
Yes. Yeah. So we're talking about what you could do at the state level. We know that Florida has taken some different positions on, how things should be taught in the school and, kind of, mandating things on teachers and stuff like that. So, what is your thought about, how we should deal with it in Maryland moving forward?
Yeah. Well, look, we've got to make sure that we protect teachers' ability to teach the truth. I'm talking to you from Silver Spring, where I live in Montgomery County. It's about 25 miles from where my great-grandfather was enslaved in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And the property where my great-grandfather was enslaved is actually still owned by the family that are direct line descendants of the family that enslaved my family. They've maintained the property just as it was in the 1860s. Same main house that was built in the 1700s, and the cabin that my great-grandfather lived in as an enslaved person with his family still standing on the property. So that's real. That's part of our history in the state, right? And so we've got to make sure that teachers teach that truth, that slavery, segregation, redlining have shaped many of the challenges that we have today. There's also the truth of the progress. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Thurgood Marshall, my family going in 3 generations from enslaved in that cabin to serving in the cabinet of the first Black president. So there's progress to describe as well. But we got to tell that truth. We ought to make sure, and there were several bills on this in the General Assembly recently, we ought to make sure that we are incorporating diversity in our curriculum, that we're telling the stories of Asian Americans, Latino folks and their contributions in our state's history and our country's history. We've got to make sure we're telling the story of LGBTQ folks and their contributions across our history, as well as some of the hard parts of our history when we've fallen short of our democratic principles. And our kids can handle that truth. And then the other thing that we've got to do is make sure that our schools are safe and supportive environments for all of our kids. And no kid should be made to feel uncomfortable being who they are. And so we got to protect our LGBTQ students. We have to stand up when we have folks like Dan Cox, who's running on the Republican side, who want to have in Maryland a bill like the Florida Don't Say Gay bill. We got to stand up against that kind of thing and make sure that all of our kids and families feel safe.
Well, why we stay on the topic of school, and I know that you're a big school guy. What is the position on school board members given full voting rights?
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's important to have elected school boards, and I think it's important to have students elected to those school boards.
Yes.
We have a student member of the board here in Montgomery County. That's a great role and a great voice to have the voice of young people at the table. But look, schools are the foundation of our democracy. And so we need to have democratic governance in our schools.
Oh, okay. So John, yes, I know that you would agree that it should be elected, but I guess my bigger question is, should those school board members who are elected to the board have full voting rights as a student school board member?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think students are ultimately the customers. Students have the perspective of being in schools every day. So when you're voting on the budget, for example, for the school district, students have a very strong perspective about the need for more school counselors. For example, I was talking to a school counselor the other day from Prince George's County who is expected to support 700 students and families by herself, right? That's not right. And so when you have a student member of the board, they're going to say, hey, in my high school, we don't have enough counselors to address kids' socio-emotional needs and also help students with the college admissions process. We need more counselors. We need to change our budget. So yes, student members should absolutely have full voting rights.
Oh yes, that's what we love to hear. And the thought is like there is a mixed debate on if they should. And for me, I'm all in favor of giving them full voting rights. I think the opposition that I heard was, they're young, right? And my best response was, even though they're young, I do believe that they're smart enough. These are the cream of the crop. Even, if we look at Prince George's County, a lot of the individuals I know, they go on to, great schools or in great professions or, become public leaders. So, these aren't, 1.0 students in any regard. These are, the cream of the crop students, and they should be able to help make decisions on behalf of their elected, on behalf of the student body. Because the thought is like some of them are sophomores, juniors, seniors. So they're the ones that continue to go there and, are directly affected by these decisions. A lot of times the other board members, some of them have kids there, but a lot of them are not going into those halls every day.
That's right. Kids are going to give you the experience of what it's like day in, day out in school buildings. They have a deep appreciation for the challenges and the opportunities.
Yes. And so one of the things that, of course, the next governor will have at his helm is what to do with schools and, what to do with the blueprint, right? So, I know that not all the candidates support the blueprint and I guess the implementation of the blueprint. But, what is your viewpoint on the blueprint? And, how are we going to, get this thing across the finish line? Of course, it's going to be years and years, but what is your opinion and how are we going to get across the finish line? Are my two questions.
Yeah. So I deeply believe in the blueprint. I think it is absolutely the right direction. I actually worked on shaping some of the language of the final bill with a coalition of civil rights groups. The Education Trust, the Education Civil Rights Group I lead, worked with a coalition including CASA, NAACP, Urban League, Identity, called the Maryland Alliance for Racial Equity in Education, and helped shape the bill. So proud of that work. There are a lot of good things in the bill: raising teacher pay, expanding pre-K, making all of our high poverty schools community schools with wraparound services, investing in career and technical education. A lot of good things. Two challenges, I would say. One is we got to make sure we have the revenue to make the investment, because the history of school funding reform, and you know this very well, the history in Maryland has been the bills pass with a lot of fanfare, but then the money never comes. So we need a governor who's committed to the revenue. I'm the only Democrat who's willing to talk about the revenue side. I believe that we have to make sure that the folks who make over $1 million a year and large corporations pay their fair share. They shouldn't pay less than small businesses or middle income folks. Now, if they pay their fair share, we will have the resources to follow through on the blueprint. But the second challenge is the blueprint should be the floor, not the ceiling for our investment. We need more investment in education support professionals. They need raises. That wasn't included in the blueprint. We need more investment in school counselors and mental health services, especially as we recover from COVID. We need investment in our pipeline of diverse teachers, particularly, I think, investing in our HBCUs and our community colleges as places that can be pipelines of educators. Right? If you identify people early, the first few years of college or while they're in community college, get them excited about teaching and then help them complete their bachelor's degree in teaching, help them go on, get a master's degree, make sure that they are teaching in subjects and regions of the state where we have desperate need. And then we should make it financially easier for folks. We should invest in loan forgiveness for folks who are willing to teach in schools where we desperately need folks, or in subjects we desperately need, like bilingual teachers, STEM teachers. But we got to make sure our teacher pipeline is racially diverse. And we got to make sure we have diverse school counselor pipeline and mental health services provider pipeline, right? And that's a role that the state can play. So we got to do those things on top of the blueprint. I also propose universal affordable childcare, birth through 5.
Sure.
Where we cap the cost of childcare at 7% of a family's income so that everybody can have childcare. It's good for the economy. It's good for families. It's good for kids' educational outcomes.
Wow. Hey, I like that universal childcare. That seems like a radical idea. Okay, I like that. But it's radical. But the thought is, it's like it would be helpful to the community because obviously they wouldn't have to worry about the burden of how they're going to come up with the childcare. Can I afford it?
That's
can I afford to go to work?
Exactly.
It's expensive to be poor. And we all know this.
You're exactly right. And look, that is an issue that cuts across race, geography, party. I've been in parts of the state that, usually vote for Republicans, talking to conservative small business owners who will describe having folks walk off the job, particularly women, walk off the job because they can't find childcare that's affordable and reliable. So they understand that our society would be stronger if we had universal affordable childcare.
Okay. Well, hey, that is huge. I agree with you. And you said something else great in there, the mental health professionals, because, I argued a year ago when we had this big SRO conversation, in some schools we have more security than we do, mental health specialists that would, deal with the kids, because the thought is they're going through trauma, right? We see these school shootings, we see, everything that these kids are going through, COVID, they're going through trauma. You know what I mean? And everything doesn't need an armed officer or a security response.
That's
sometimes
exactly right.
Sometimes they just need a little love, right? A little guidance.
That's right. Look, that was me. After my dad passed, I moved around different family members, different schools, and I struggled. Having gone through trauma as a kid, I was angry at adults, angry at the world. I got in a lot of trouble. I actually got kicked out of high school. I'm the first United States Secretary of Education to have been kicked out of high school. And, I was just lucky. I was lucky that there were teachers and a school counselor and some family members who gave me a second chance. But if not for them, I could have been fed right into that school to prison pipeline. And that happens for so many young people. They make a mistake, 15, 16, 17, and we as a society give up on them. That's exactly wrong. We should be investing in addressing that trauma and trying to help young people get their lives headed in the right direction.
Hey, John, I applaud that. And speaking of giving people the opportunity and second chances and, being caring, I asked somebody recently, would they, as governor, or if they were the next head of state, would they give incarcerated people, who are convicted, the right to vote? Because, my opinion was that, a lot of those people, their votes were constitutionally taken away, and under the 13th Amendment. And, I don't feel the position that they have to serve their term in order to vote, because the thought is like they still receive census money for these individuals, right? So, if they're receiving money for these individuals, they should, of course, have a right to vote, even under the Constitution. But what is your thought? Of course, as next governor, this is something that I'm going to push.
Good. Look, this is a democracy. In a democracy, everybody gets to vote. Everybody gets to participate. And you're right. The history of our criminal justice system has been often that the criminal justice system has been used to disenfranchise. So absolutely on voting rights. And the other piece I would say is, look, 95% of the folks who are incarcerated are coming home. We ought to make it possible for folks to get education, job training, addiction treatment, mental health services, mediation services to work out conflicts with family members. All of that should be available to folks while incarcerated, so that folks have an opportunity to succeed when they come home. One of the things I worked on when I was secretary was trying to correct a mistake that Congress made in the mid-90s. In the 94 crime bill, Congress banned access to Pell Grants for incarcerated students. And college programs in prisons all over the country closed overnight. A few stayed open with philanthropy, but many of them closed. And this was terrible policy. If folks want to get skills while incarcerated, that's better for everybody. It's better for them, better for their family, better for our neighborhoods. So President Obama and I tried to persuade Congress to change the law. Republican Congress, they didn't want to change the law. So we used our authority under the Higher Education Act to create a pilot program called Second Chance Pell, allowing 65 colleges and universities, including Goucher College here in Maryland, to provide education for folks who are incarcerated with Pell Grant dollars. And then in the civil rights community, we used that program as a model to push Congress. And finally, in December 20, we got Congress to repeal that ban on Pell Grants. So now going forward, Pell Grants are going to be available for all incarcerated students. But we have to really rethink our approach to incarceration in this country. We have to see it as an opportunity to help people get their lives on track so that when they come home, they are successful.
Yes, well, I appreciate that. I know that I could look forward to, having you as an ally and an advocate, for the next push, because a lot of people still don't know that, ex-felons have the right to vote. There wasn't a big public information campaign, and a lot of times on the doors, I'm still informing people that, know your rights have been restored.
That's right.
So I appreciate that. And the last question, of course, I'll ask you is, we have a lot to look forward to in November. Not only do we have, of course, a big election, but we have cannabis on the ballot. Right? The next governor is going to be responsible, have a lot to do with cannabis and, its implementation. Are you in support of legalization for responsible adult use? And not only legalization for responsible adult use, but the reparative justice. Like, what reparative justice would you like to see? I would like to see, of course, people who are in jail on cannabis charges come home. That's one of many. But so the question is, do you want to see legalization pass? And what other parts of legalization would you like to see?
100% support legalization, and was one of the first candidates in the race to call for legalization of cannabis. As we do that, some things we need to make sure we do: expunge the records of anybody who has convictions that are related to cannabis. Second, we got to make sure that the industry that emerges is one that is diverse, where folks of color have an opportunity, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans have an opportunity to participate in that industry. Because what we've seen in some other states is these large multi-state national corporations come in, take over the whole industry, and there's no economic opportunity for folks from the community to participate. So we've got to be very careful about the design of the industry. And the third thing the revenue should disproportionately go back to those communities that have been most negatively impacted by the war on drugs. Senator Carter had a bill saying that the funds, a majority of the funds that are coming in from the cannabis industry as revenue for the state should go back to the communities that have been most harmed. I think that's the exact right approach. This is an opportunity to restore the harm that was done by the misguided policy over the last few decades.
Yes, and we know you're good. And the thought is one of the things I wanted to point out. One of your staffers had made me aware there's a new poll out. So the new poll out, you jumped in the polls, John, right? So that is something to be happy about, something to smile about. And one thing that I was curious about is, what do you feel you guys have done differently in the last few months to see this surge in the polls? Of course, there's only been, I think, one candidate that dropped. So, I think you guys are strong, but I was okay. Double digits. So, I was happy to see that. Okay.
We are excited about, look, what we've seen throughout this campaign from our focus groups and our polling, and more importantly, from meeting folks in backyards and living rooms and at county fairs, is that when people hear our message, we win. And over the last 5 weeks, we've been on television communicating our message, sharing my story, letting people know how important education is to me, the work that I want to do to build a more equitable, more just future for the state, making clear that I am the progressive candidate in the race. And as people hear our message, it's resonating and folks are joining us. And I think we're going to see that movement continue to grow.
Okay. Hey, awesome. I appreciate it. And I feel like we always do a couple rapid questions so people get to know you. So the first question I wanted to ask you was, are you a Pepsi or Coke type of person?
I used to drink a lot of Diet Coke, and then I made myself stop. And so I moved over to unsweetened iced tea.
Okay. Hey, the healthier choice.
Mm-hmm.
My next question is, favorite Maryland event?
Favorite Maryland event. I mean, I'm a Ravens fan, so I'd say Ravens games would be near the top there.
Okay. Yeah. And I feel like we could tell a lot by this last question. Who's your favorite superhero? You get to be a kid right now.
Wow, that's such an interesting question. Yes, I love it.
Who's the last governor candidate, right?
Yeah. I guess I would have to say Batman. I've always related to, having lost my parents as a kid, I've always related to the Batman story. I'm older, so I go back to the Michael Keaton Batman, which I think was the best Batman.
He's one of the better ones. I like the early 2000s one. I forgot which one that one was, but the early 2000s one I thought was really good.
Yeah. I mean, they've done a good job with that with that franchise over the years. I watched the TV show when I was a kid.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate it, and you're the first one I think that said Batman. So for people who don't know, tell them how they can stay connected.
Yes. So folks will visit our website, johnkingforgovernor.com, and follow us on Twitter at John B. King.
Yes. And John, we wish you luck in the coming weeks. Of course, you got a lot of knocking. You have a lot of appearances, probably some debates. So we wish you the best of luck making it through.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity. I hope folks will not only vote for me, but really join our movement to build a more progressive future. Thanks so much.
Well, you guys know how you can stay connected with Secretary King. And guys, we have an election coming up July 19th. There's a lot of great candidates. You've heard from Secretary King, a lot of great ideas. So continue to engage with them. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Hi. My name is William Honolulu Jr., and I'm the host of the BlackUSA.news morning show and the president of the Grinding Gang Incorporated. The Grinding Gang is an organization that helps small business owners in the nonprofit and for-profit communities figure out how to make sense of all the noise. There's a lot of information out there, and sometimes it gets a little overwhelming. We help you develop business plans. We help you figure out what to do with a lot of the information you receive, and we also help you figure out how to become more profitable. We also host a variety of workshops. You can check out our next workshop on grant writing right here.
I had a conversation last week. Can Black people be racist?
I think race.
Because my argument is no. But
Well,
I'll let you go. I'll let you go.
Well, I've carried that sentiment on the discussion about we've never been in power to be racist, to keep other folks all that. The center of racism is this discussion about race being a man-made concept, you know, and the social construct of race was created by people who hated your black blood, and they wanted to get you oppressed. So the center of that is a lack of love, or a hate, or whatever you call it. So the greatest fear of these same people who've been benefiting from that hate all these years is that we're gonna do the same thing to them. That's the whole thing. So that's the interchange of, unfortunately, the interchange of religion was there too, because they thought that if you could convert people to Christianity, in this case, that they would believe that love piece, which we embrace. You know, the story about Africa is that before Europeans came to Africa, the Africans, our African ancestors, had the land, the gold, the diamonds, and everything else. And then when the Europeans came, they brought the Bible and took the gold, the diamonds, and the land, and everything else. So so everybody out there in the world knows I would rather have the land, the gold, the diamonds, and everything else. But the point is that the indoctrination that was forced on our ancestors created a fear for white people to have the retaliation. And so I guess to answer your question is, I don't think that it's important to talk about racism because that's some mess that we have had to deal with since we've been here. It's important to talk about how our hearts can be transformed to be vehicles of love. And unfortunately, because none of us trust each other because of all of what we're talking about, and unfortunately it plays out in our own community because there's no difference between an African man like you going into any place and stepping on somebody's toe, and the best thing that a person can think of to do is to shoot you, or to stab you, or to beat you down so you die. Now, when they report that to your mother, does it matter whether a white man did that to you, or does it matter whether a black man did that to you? And that doesn't, I mean, I'll answer that question. It doesn't matter. You were killed by hate. You were killed by someone who lacked the sentiment of love in their heart to think twice about something as small as a disagreement. So I think that in the political construct that you're presenting, it is the case that we can argue and continue to argue. I'm not going to argue with you or anybody else about black.
No, hey, I'm open. I'm open. You know, but
I am going to remind you that you can look at you live in Prince George's County.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that in the Prince George's County, where you have a black county executive, a black state's attorney, majority black council, I think every little town you have probably has a black elected official, that for the first time in history, everything should be going right. All the decisions you should make about black people should be in coordination to create a perfect black world. Shouldn't that be the case?
Well, in theory, but I'll just say briefly, in reality, that's not the case. You know, everyone who is
I know it's not the case.
yeah, but yeah, everyone who's perceived to be in power is not necessarily in power. You know, there are puppets behind the strings. You know, that's really all I'll say, because you know we're running short. We're running short, Willie. I can't get into the. You know, we could be here all day talking about Prince George's
Well,
politics.
I want to answer your question. I want to remind you of the pieces of your question, and to say that if we're not propelled to try to figure out our roles as human beings and what our purpose is while we're in this human form, and that takes work, we're always susceptible to being on the wrong side of the love-hate paradigm. And it doesn't matter if you are racist. It doesn't matter if whatever you want to call it. It matters to me that we're trying to figure out our purpose while we're here in human form, and how we can propel love, and in positions like yours to figure out someday sometime in the day that you're using love as an organizing tool to do these things in a structure that you have political power to do. Because it is the case now that the history of this country is that those who were in those positions were not doing love work, particularly for our people. So it can be, you can walk away with it saying that, well, I wouldn't have done the same thing if I were in a position. Well, Clarence Thomas is a black man who has sat in a position for quite a while, and he has done, he has picked up.
So I would say, Willie, that all folk is not skin, all kinfolk is not skin folk. We know that
every brother ain't a brother because a black man killed a Malcolm X a man, all that. But my point is to you that you're saying black people can't be racist, but Clarence Thomas is a part of a racist system, and he has done more damage than some of the races that you say that raised the Confederate flag and all that kind of stuff.
But I mean, I would also argue that Clarence Thomas, you know, doesn't have as much power as he believes, or we would believe he has, right? Like we know that
Clarence Thomas is very powerful in the position he's in. He's been on a swing vote of things.
You're right.
Changed. He definitely could have changed the 2000 election, but he didn't do it.
That's true. That's that's fair. I'm not even going to argue. I'm not even going to argue there. That is very true. And Willie, a couple quick questions. Who do you like for governor in Maryland?
I mean, I've met most of those guys, and in the position I'm in, I'm not going to answer that question. So there's something to like about all of them, but I can say this, that I don't see any powerful campaign considering, you know, everything. The evidence of that is a lot of people don't even know that it's a gubernatorial year, and if they don't know that, they certainly don't know the people running for governor. So, and I just don't see a street fight. I mean, they're trying to win one of the most powerful governorships in the country, and I haven't seen, minus the attack on Wes Moore in Baltimore, I haven't seen a confrontation that equates to someone being passionate enough, desirous enough to do what is legitimate in political warfare to win an election. So until that happens, the status quo is going to decide the election, and that's very unfortunate.
That's fair. And that's a good assessment. We'll continue to talk about that. Pepsi or Coke, Willie?
Pepsi or Coke?
Pepsi or Coke?
What did I hate to say this.
Water?
I say that the